Welcome back. If you've just joined us, you're watching the news at 10, coming to you live from Lagos. A reminder of our major stories tonight. The Federal High Court in Lagos orders the President and Acting President to publish the names of alleged looters. House of Representatives may invite former President Goodluck Jonathan to testify on the Malabo oil deal. More Boko Haram militants surrender to Nigerian troops as Air Force launches fresh attack on Sambisa Forest. And Al-Shabaab militants engage Kenyan forces in day-long battle. 3 police officers are killed. For more on our top stories and others, please visit our website, channelstv.com and youtube.com/channelsweb. Also, please log on to m.channelstv.com to watch us on our mobile device, or download the Channels TV app for Android, iOS, and Windows devices from their respective stores. The Channels TV and Channels 24 app will give you access to news and updates. You'll also have access to the Eyewitness feature, with which you can share those pictures, videos, or news of happenings around you. Just install the app, then tap and swipe to reveal the menu, and then follow the instructions. The governor of Ogun State, Ibikunle Amosu, today directed security operatives in the state not to spare any cult member or groups operating within the state. The governor, who met with heads of security agencies in the state capital, Abeokuta, says there is no room for criminals to hibernate. His views were corroborated by the police commissioner of Ogun State.
It is not maybe a warning. It is putting them on notice that this is Ogun State. We are ready for any criminal, whichever name they decide to call themselves, that we are fully prepared. Ogun State has never been and will never be a comfort zone for criminals. They give themselves different names. To me, either you said you are maybe militant or all this, you know, they have different names. Some will say yeah, some will say the latest one is they call themselves Badu. And we've been told that they said they want to come to Ogun State. My advice to them is they should just don't come to Ogun State, so they should go and jump into the lagoon or into the sea there. Because if they come here, they will be killed. I know what I'm saying. I'm speaking with all sense of responsibility. No criminal should be allowed to come and terrorize us. What is happening to us? How can some characters just decide to lord it over everybody? I understand that they just go maim and kill, seize property the way they seize property the way they like. They grab land anyhow. This is Ogun State.
We are united. We are committed, and we are willing to deal with any infiltration. Whether you are Badu, whether you are Yahoo, under any mythology, under any mystery, we are going to demystify you. There is innocent here. There is no place for any criminal to come into this show to hibernate and incubate. We are ready to take any criminal down. So they should find another place, not in Ogun State.
The Nigerian Bar Association has expressed deep concern at the recent heightened agitation by individuals, groups, and organizations calling for the violent breakup of the country. The association also condemned the acts of hate and incitement which have been disseminated through the media. In a press release made available to Channels Television, the president of the NBA, Abubakar Mahmood, asked Nigerians to resist the tendency to turn on one another during these difficult times. The NBA also reaffirmed its belief in the unity and sovereignty of the country and stressed that any advocacy for a violent breakup of the nation is misguided. Following complaints by some Nigerians over their treatment by Ethiopian Airlines, the House of Representatives has called on the airline to offer flight delay compensation to over 1,000 Nigerians. In a motion sponsored by Honorable Zachary Mohammed and 3 other members, the lawmakers were informed that Nigerians who were on their way back from Saudi Arabia were stranded for over 1 week. The House has directed its Committee on Aviation to meet with the Minister of Aviation and officials of the airline to explain the delay. The House is also calling for the prompt and immediate evacuation of the Nigerians stranded in Jeddah and an apology from the airline.
So, and I discovered
the House notes that the desire of the country to keep pace with global trend in science, technology, and economic development necessitated the grant of quotas for expatriates to come into the country to take up jobs that Nigerians lack the requisite skills to undertake. The House also notes that the Nigerian Immigration Service is empowered to issue entry permits and expatriate quotas and monitor the entry of expatriates in order to ensure employment of foreigners only in the areas where Nigerians lack skills, so as to ensure transfer of technology and skills to Nigerians. Aware that owing to the failure of the Nigerian Immigration Service to effectively police the nation's borders, expatriates illegally enter the country, while some others use official entry points in the guise of being expatriates and take up jobs that Nigerians have the skills to undertake, thus worsening the unemployment situation in the country. And the trend is not likely to abate unless the illegal entry points are closed and the failure of the Immigration Service to monitor the borders is addressed.
We do sincerely apologize for the mix-up there. We'll make the correction and possibly bring in the correct one before the news is over. Miners across West Africa are calling for more efforts by political office holders in addressing the infrastructural deficit in the region. Speaking at a meeting in Abuja, the miners say the provision of infrastructure will fast-track development in the mining sector and boost revenues.
How to leverage on the competitive demand for mineral resources in the West African region is what informed this meeting, organized by the Association of West African Miners. Statistics from the World Bank shows that output in gold exploration in Africa rose by 2% in 2016. It also revealed that the 10 top mining countries in Africa in terms of production are in the West African sub-region. In spite of this cheering news, however, experts at the meeting noted some challenges that impedes the contribution of the sector to the region's economy.
No doubt, African countries need to create the enabling environment for the economic transformation to be achieved. Notable among these are reliable, cost-effective infrastructure, including rail, road, and sea transport, as well as energy in their form of power and diesel. Whilst host countries should lead the way, the private sector certainly has a critical role to play.
On our part, we wish to call on this platform to serve as a bigger advocacy platform that will capture the concern, the challenges, and the solutions of mining challenges in the region.
Government officials at the meeting pledged to provide solutions for the issues raised. This is expected to translate into an effective mining industry in West Africa.
The geological setting of West Africa is identical, except a few places where you have exceptions. But whatever results you have, any person from Ghana can take up interpreted data from Nigeria and assume that it can be contiguous in surrounding countries.
Mining opportunities abound in West Africa. Experts say the time to revive the sector towards job creation and poverty reduction for its populace is now.
Some 40 years ago, Nigeria was one of the promoters of the West African economic integration body called ECOWAS, with headquarters in Lagos, the then country's political and economic capital. As an emerging economic force powered by petrodollars, agri-based exports, and a military to be reckoned with, Nigeria pulled its weight in good measure in the establishment of the strategically important institutions such as the African Development Bank and the Africa Export-Import Bank.
Although the country is yet a force to be beaten in oil and gas output, consumer market, among other parameters, changes in global geopolitics and economic interest have thrown up a number of new challenges to Nigeria's previous near monopoly.
There is every reason to believe that it will continue to grow and develop with appropriate policy responses. However, it cannot be business as usual. The business model of extracting and exporting raw commodities with little or no value added cannot continue. This old approach must give way to a broad-based growth model driven by import substitution strategies that will localize production, help create jobs and achieve sustainable growth.
In West Africa, countries such as Ivory Coast, Ghana and even Senegal are becoming attractive to investors and businesses. In the East Africa corridor, at least 5 economies look set to give Nigeria a run for its shirt. Kenya, Ethiopia, Rwanda, Uganda and Tanzania are on the list. But hitting home at Nigeria is last week's announcement by the European Union that the days of overseas development assistance funding support are over. The EU tells Nigeria to put its heart into ECOWAS economic integration and leverage its position in the region for growth. That sounds like a wake-up call for a country that has expended uncounted billions of dollars in peacekeeping missions across the region and Africa, pioneered economic integration and building institutions of which it has little or nothing to show for all the expended human and material resources.
I'm now being joined on the news at 10 by a faculty member of the Lagos Business School, the economist Dr. Adi Bongo. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Now, I guess some would say we're sounding like a broken record, but it seems like we're falling back again. Nigeria, in our own backyard, as it were. Where did we get it wrong?
Yeah, I think I overheard, and then I think it was reported some days ago that the EU is withdrawing overseas development assistance to Nigeria. Nigeria's economic policy, or international economic policy, or foreign policy, has been kind of chameleonic in the past, since after independence. So first we have the 3 concentric circles of economic policy or foreign policy. First is the projection and promotion of Nigeria's national interest. The second one is African and economic integration, which starts with West Africa and then Africa, and then the last, the outer circle is the rest of the world.
Right.
Okay. So that was vigorously pursued after independence. I remember because there was a huge inflow of petrodollars. I remember at the point we were paying salaries of in some countries, and then hosting the African Festival of Arts, Festac, and so on and so forth. So the country was awash with a whole lot of money to project interest abroad. We are also very active in anti-apartheid fights, struggle in South Africa, in the rest of the Southern Africa. But then Nigeria has done a whole lot, peacekeeping in Sierra Leone, in Liberia, in the Congos, and so on. So we've done a whole lot, but the rest of Africa hasn't reciprocated what Nigeria has done for them. But then, talking about Nigeria and its economic interest in the rest of West Africa, I think there was a time when Nigerian products were competing and selling, very well in African markets, in Cote d'Ivoire, in Togo, in Benin Republic, even in places like Congo, Gabon. And that was the days when the shoe cluster in Aba, places like Aba, the clothing cluster also somewhere in Oyo State, were very active. And then that propelled economic migration of so many Nigerians to these countries.
Those countries, yes.
Yeah, so that really happened until there was a change in economic policy, in trade policy, that allowed, the inflow or influx, if you may, of so many cheap products from China. That completely destroyed, deindustrialized the shoe cluster, the clothing cluster, and all those products that we had competing in Africa. So that's actually what happened.
Now, you did allude to the EU scrapping all these grants and subsidies helping. How, in the immediate aftermath of this decision, how will that affect this attempt, again, to re-project ourselves in the sub-region?
I think, okay, having cited our own trade policy, that's an internal, but there's also an external angle to this, because part of the reason why ECOWAS hasn't quite functioned as planned is the intrusion of France. Okay, the Francophone countries tend to have a different agenda from the Anglophone countries. And then when it comes to West Africa, I think there are more Francophone countries than Anglophone countries. So there is always this divergence in terms of interest between the Anglophone and the Francophone countries. So France plays a major role in the disunity, or the lack of integration of the countries in the ECOWAS region, in West Africa. So that is another problem that we have. Then we also need to consider the divergence in terms of the colonial histories of these countries, because that tends to shape their foreign policy relations. Nigeria is a vassal state to Britain.
Right.
Okay? The Francophone countries are vassal states to France. And then over time, they've had divergent interests. Now, our foreign trade partners, the major, if you look at the list, we have India, Spain, and no African country.
That's right.
Okay? So the question is, how do we begin to revitalize or kick back what we used to do?
Now, especially that we've lost the EU.
We have lost the EU. But I think it has to do with, again, building a competitive economy. First of all, we have to address the trade policy issue. Okay? We need to protect our local industries. Protecting our local industries means that we need to find ways to keep out Chinese dumping. So we need to have anti-dumping policies in the system. Because what we have today is a situation where the Chinese dump all manner of products here, and that destroys our local capacity to do anything. So in order to boost that capacity, it is very, very important that the government promotes industry clusters, strengthening the cluster that we used to have. And then that will begin to, of course, add the needed value in what is produced here, make them more competitive, especially in the West African sub-region.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bongo, for joining us on the News at 10. Thank you very much for coming in. When the News at 10 returns, students of Osun State University protest the killing of one of their own by suspected ritualists. Please stay with us.